Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wealth Conversation podcast with me, Tsitsi Mutiti. I guide high-achieving women on their journey to build lasting wealth so they can prepare for an abundant future in every area of their life. I hope that today's episode will help you to transform your relationship with money so you can make the choices that will enable you to create the opportunities and lasting wealth that you desire. Let's get straight into this week's episode. This is the second and final episode of the Money Habits and Mindset two-part series. If you've been listening to this podcast since it launched, then you will know by now that step number 2 of the Choices Blueprint focuses on understanding your money habits and mindset. Now, in episode 5, I introduced the first 3 habits and attitudes. So in this episode, I'll be walking you through the last 3 habits, which are status, giving, and security. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, the 6 habits and attitudes have been collectively called the Money Habitudes by Sybil Solomon, the founder of LifeWise Strategies and the creator of the Money Habitudes assessment. Sybil also specializes in the psychology of money. I also mentioned that habits are the small decisions you make and the actions you take every day. And according to researchers, habits account for about 40% of our behaviors in any given day. So it's important to recognize that these decisions and actions are based on some of our memories, thoughts, and feelings that are etched in our subconscious. And oftentimes our habits show up almost on autopilot when a memory, thought, or feeling has been triggered. Taking the time to actively understand and acknowledge these rules or mindset and identifying how they trigger your habits is key to understanding you. As a reminder, the money message that comes up when you're using the status habit is make a good impression. For giving, it's help others, and security is all about stay safe and secure. As you will know by now, I am a giver, and whilst on the surface the giving habit appears to be a great habit to have, giving unchecked can be quite destructive. And for me, my giving habit is partly what caused me to end up in debt. To figure out how to deal with my giving habit, I had to go backwards and figure out the root of this habit. And this journey took me to when I was between the ages of 3 and 5 years old. And I remembered the times when my aunts and uncles and my parents' friends would come to the house to visit. More often than not, before they left, one of them would give me some money. And my mother would always tell me to give her the money so she could look after it, which made complete and utter sense and was the right thing to do. But you know what? I actually never knew what happened to the money. I never asked her, and at this point in my life, I will never know because she is no longer with us. But what I do know is that experience, or at least a feeling that represented the memory which had been buried deep in my subconscious, would be triggered whenever someone close to me needed help, and it would manifest itself in my actions. And the most frequent action was to give my time, and more often than not, my money, without ever expecting to see it again. I literally would say, don't worry about paying it back. And as the years went by, I started borrowing to give to those who needed help from me because I was giving so much before that I was now getting into my overdraft and using debt to cover my own personal expenses. But even though I was borrowing money and giving to others to help others, even then, I wasn't too fussed about what they needed the money for and how soon they would pay the money back. I also realized when I was going through this process that the expectation that I should set a good example and look out for my sisters, on top of the fact that I didn't know what happened to the money I had received as a young child after I'd given it to my mother, all these became the basis of how I made some of my financial decisions. Even though I was doing something good by helping others, I was actually taking away from myself and my financial future. And I was also reducing my ability to give in the future. So, what did I do? I decided that I should make a plan. And that plan was to give from my surplus, give from a cup that is overflowing. And to do this, I had to use my planning habit and use that habit to come up with the strategy of how I can give and give to others whilst giving to myself. And I talk about planning and the advantages and disadvantages of the planning habit in episode 5. So make sure you listen to that episode if you haven't done so already. But since today I'm talking about giving, I guess I should also highlight some of the advantages and disadvantages that givers might face. When the giving habitude is used effectively, givers tend to have strong values and convictions. They also generously give to other people or causes, and they are admired for being able to anticipate others' needs. But some of the challenges that you may face related to the giving habitude are: you are often disappointed if money or gifts are not appreciated, and you can use giving as a form of control to impose your personal values on others. Resentment can show up, and you can resent when giving is expected and assumed. Giving also tends to promote dependence and irresponsible behavior by giving too much or too often. And one thing I did experience was that you sacrifice your needs or future security for others. And I cannot tell you how giving impacted my view on myself and on some of the people who I did give to. And, let me be clear, there were other people who gave to me as well whilst I was going through this cycle. I am going to be digging much deeper into giving and especially over giving. And I'll be bringing a guest in a couple of weeks to specifically talk about the impact on overgiving. Now, I said I'd be talking about status and security. And so I'd just like to touch briefly on the advantages and disadvantages of both these habits. So let's start with status. When the status habit is used effectively, you will present a strong impression, a very strong first impression, and you tend to make generous donations. People who have a dominant status habit never burden others about money problems, and they're appreciated for their generosity and helping others. However, like everything, all the other habits, there are disadvantages, and they include creating a false impression of having wealth, feeling constant stress to keep up with others, and you may not have reserves for the unexpected. And one really big one is keeping money secrets because of the fear of losing friends or status if others knew your real financial situation. And the last habitude is security. This habit tends to be the dominant habit for people who are focused on saving for that rainy day. The advantages of effectively using the security habit are that you have a budget, financial goals, and savings. You also have more choices later because you've saved today for tomorrow. And people who focus on security take care of their possessions so that they last longer. They also find it easy to get their money in case of emergencies. But there are disadvantages and challenges, which include that you may save so much that there is no money for today's wants and needs. And by avoiding risk, money is safe, but it doesn't grow, or your job is secure, but you can't go any higher. And the last challenge I'll highlight is that you could sacrifice participating in enjoyable activities or relationships because of the cost involved. So there you have it. I've gone through the last 3 money habitudes. I want you to remember that we all have the power to influence our behaviors, and I would encourage you to listen to episode 4 of this podcast, where I interviewed my friend and certified financial coach, Catherine Thomas Humphreys. During the interview, we talked about influencing your money habits and mindset. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Connect with me at The Wealth Conversation on Facebook and Instagram so we can continue the discussion. Also, if you're ready to define what wealth truly means to you, then go to thewealthconversation.com and download the Wealth Cornerstones Guide. Until next week, stay focused on becoming the designer of your financial future.